The entire auditorium erupted in laughter as Jamal stood awkwardly at the podium. A smirk curled on Logan's face as he shouted, "You? You barely speak English right." A few students snorted. One even whispered, "What's the janitor's kid doing up there?" Jamal looked down for a second, then lifted his head. Calm, unshaken, and when he finally spoke, silence fell. "Buenas tardes," he began in flawless Spanish. Then, without pausing, "Bonsoir à tous," French, then German, then Russian, Arabic, Japanese, Korean, 12 languages, each more perfect than the last. The laughter vanished. Eyes widened. Mouths opened. No one moved. And Jamal, the boy they mocked, stood taller than he ever had before. By the 12th language, even the principal had put down his phone. Jamal hadn't just spoken. He had shattered every assumption in the room. And he was just getting started. Jamal wasn't the kind of student you noticed. He sat in the last row, always quiet, always observing. While other kids laughed and scrolled to their phones, Jamal flipped through secondhand textbooks with worn-out covers and notes written in a dozen languages. He didn't wear designer shoes. He didn't have a fancy iPad. What had was silence, and a mind sharper than anyone realized. His father, Mr. Lawrence, worked as a janitor at the same elite private school. Every morning at 5 a.m., he mopped the very floors these kids walked across in their polished shoes. Every night, he'd come home with aching knees, hands stained with bleach, and still managed to bring Jamal warm food and a smile. "One day, son," he'd say, "they'll know your name. Not mine, yours." But at Westbrook Academy, names already mattered, especially the ones on bank accounts. Logan Prescott, Brandon West, Chloe Hale, legacy kids from old money. They didn't care where you came from, unless it was from behind the cafeteria line. And Jamal? To them, he was just a janitor's son who didn't belong. He rarely spoke in class, not because he didn't know the answers, but because he learned early on that no one really wanted to hear them. Teachers praised louder voices. Students clapped for shiny confidence. And Jamal just studied, quietly, unseen, misjudged. No one asked why he took notes in strange symbols, why he wrote pages left to right to left, even top to bottom. No one cared. Not yet. But Jamal didn't need their attention. He had a plan, and unlike most kids in that room, he didn't need noise to be brilliant. He just needed one chance to speak. It started like any normal Tuesday. The smell of overpriced coffee floated through the hallway. Students slumped into their seats in debate and ethics class, groaning as a substitute wheeled in a cart full of printed speech prompts. "All right, class," the substitute said cheerfully. "Today we'll be practicing real-time response debates. Random pairings. Topics assigned on the spot." The groans got louder, except from Jamal, who silently adjusted his cracked glasses and continued writing in his notebook. Logan Prescott leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. Blonde, smug, and entitled. He ran the school like it was a private club. His father sat on the board, and he reminded everyone of that every chance he got. "All right," the sub continued. "Logan Prescott and Jamal Lawrence, you two are first." The class instantly shifted. Logan smirked. "Wait, him." A few kids snickered. The substitute, oblivious, smiled and handed each a paper. Topic: should multilingual education be a requirement in U.S. schools? Logan burst out laughing. "Are you serious?" He turned to the class. "We're doing a language debate and he's my opponent?" Jamal slowly stood. His palms were sweating, but his face stayed calm. Logan didn't stop. "Why even try, bro? Your dad cleans toilets. You think knowing any language gets you out of that?" Laughter scattered around the room. Not loud, but enough. Jamal didn't flinch. He just stood quietly, looking down at the topic paper in his hand. The substitute shifted awkwardly, realizing too late that something was wrong. "Logan, that's enough," she muttered. But Logan wasn't done. "Seriously, Ms. A, this is a waste of time. I speak French." "What does he even speak? Janitor?" A deeper laugh rippled through the room. One girl at the back whispered, "Why doesn't he say anything?" Jamal raised his eyes. His gaze locked with Logan's, but he didn't speak, didn't defend. He simply nodded once, folded his paper, and returned to his seat. The substitute hesitated, embarrassed. All right, we'll move on. Then, Chloe and Brandon, you're next. The class moved on, but something hung in the air, a silence heavier than the laughter. It wasn't just that Jamal had been mocked. It was that he had chosen silence. Not because he was weak, but because he wasn't ready. Not yet, but he would be. Long before Westbrook Academy. Long before the insults and silence. Jamal's world was made of languages. At night, while his father mopped silent hallways, Jamal sat at their small kitchen table beside a second-hand cassette player. Mr. Lawrence had once worked maintenance at a community college and had saved old language learning tapes from the dumpster. Spanish, French, Arabic, Russian, German. He played them like bedtime stories. Someday, his father would whisper, these voices will take you farther than I've ever been. By age 8, Jamal could pronounce things most adults couldn't spell. But he didn't brag. Not once. Instead of cartoons, Jamal watched science lectures on YouTube in Italian. He followed Korean cooking channels, Russian documentaries, and Japanese history classes. He learned to understand people without ever meeting them. He watched anime, no subtitles, read old Spanish novels, flipping pages like he was born to them, learned alphabets no one at school had ever even seen. But he never showed it, not because he wasn't proud, but because he knew what they'd say. Weird, nerd, janitor's kid pretending to be smart. So he kept it locked inside, like a secret superpower waiting for the right moment. To them, he was quiet. To himself, he was fluent in 12 ways of understanding the world. And that morning, when Logan humiliated him, something shifted. The silence Jamal wore like armor had cracked, not broken, just enough for light to come through. And soon, they'd all see what he'd been building in the dark. The announcement came on a gray Thursday morning, right before first bell. "Attention students," crackled the intercom. Westbrook Academy will be hosting its first ever multilingual speech competition, open to all grades. Winners will receive a letter of recommendation and a $5,000 scholarship. The cafeteria buzzed. Logan leaned back in his chair, smirking like it had already been handed to him. "Guess I should enter," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "French, Spanish. Might as well win something while I'm here." His friends laughed. "What are you going to speak?" "Rich," one joked. "I speak fluent confidence," Logan shot back, flipping his hair. "That's enough." Near the edge of the room, Jamal stirred. He had paused mid-bite, the announcement still ringing in his ears. His fingers moved unconsciously, tracing Korean letters across the side of his paper bag. He said nothing, but something in his eyes lit up. Later that day, a clipboard was taped outside the main office. Speech contest sign-up. Logan's name was at the top, written in thick black marker. Below it were a few more names, mostly kids from the language club. Then, as the final bell rang and the hallway cleared, a quiet hand reached forward. Jamal Lawrence. Small letters. Neat handwriting. Just one name at the bottom of the page. The next morning, laughter followed. "Wait, Jamal? He signed up. Is this a joke? You? Compete with Logan?" Someone said, half choking on their drink. Logan passed Jamal in the hallway. "Hey, Janitor Jr., what are you gonna do? Say mop in 5 languages." Jamal just looked at him, eyes steady. No anger, no fear, just focus. He didn't need applause, or attention, or even respect. Not yet. He just needed one mic. And they were about to hand it to him. By Monday, the hallway chatter had shifted. The speech contest was 2 days away, and but circled like wildfire. Teachers whispered. Students speculated. But somewhere behind closed doors, a quiet decision was made. Logan's father, Mr. Prescott, a major donor and member of the school board, had paid a visit to the front office. "This competition reflects our academy's excellence," he said, voice sharp. "Having janitorial blood on stage sends a wrong message. Remove the boy from the list." Quietly, and so they did. No announcement, no explanation, just erased. Jamal walked by the sign-up sheet the next morning and blinked. His name was gone. He stared at the page. No cross-out, no correction. It was like he'd never written it at all, as if he didn't exist. He didn't argue, didn't complain. He just walked home that evening slower than usual, backpack dragging. At home, his father was repairing a broken fan with duct tape when Jamal entered, unusually quiet. "What's wrong?" Mr. Lawrence asked. Standing up, Jamal held out the crumpled sign-up sheet. "I didn't quit, Dad. They just took me off." Mr. Lawrence stared at the paper, his jaw clenched. But instead of anger, he smiled. "You know what I used to tell your mom?" he said softly. "If they won't give you a seat at the table, you bring your own chair." He placed a firm hand on Jamal's shoulder. "But you don't need a chair. Or a mic. If they won't give you a voice, son, take the whole stage." Jamal looked up. The sadness in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something stronger. Resolve. "I will," he said. And for the first time, Mr. Lawrence saw his son not as a quiet boy with books, but as the storm that was coming. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Students filed in wearing polished shoes and forced confidence. Parents, donors, and staff filled the back rows, clipboard and coffee in hand. Westbrook's first ever multilingual speech competition was underway. Backstage, Logan stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his perfectly ironed collar. "This'll be easy," he muttered, practicing a line in French. "Bonjour, je m'appelle Logan." He blinked. "Comment CAVA?" "Wait, what's education again?" "No matter." He smiled at himself. Confidence was a language he knew best. When his name was called, thunderous applause greeted him. He walked on stage like he owned it, because in his mind he did. He greeted the audience in French, but within 10 seconds, he began stumbling. J'ai education importante, he blinked at the prompter. Silence fell. A few polite chuckles echoed from the back. Logan cleared his throat, tried again, this time switching to Spanish. "Hola, yo soy el estudiante." More silence. A cough. A whisper. He looked over at the judges, now scribbling uncomfortably. Panic flashed in his eyes. He rushed through a sentence in English and hurried off stage, his smirk long gone. Then something happened. As the host prepared to announce the next speaker, a quiet movement near the front row caught everyone's eye. Jamal Lawrence stood, without a name on the list, without permission, without a mic. He simply walked up the steps. Whispers erupted. A teacher leaned forward, whispering to the host. He's not on the list. But Jamal was already standing center stage. No notes, no slides, just his voice. He looked out at the crowd, all those faces that had ignored, mocked, or erased him. And then he began. "Buenas tardes," he said, calm and clear. Then, "Je vous remercie de m'avoir invité ici aujourd'hui." Then, Mandarin, Russian, Swahili, Japanese, Hindi, Hebrew, German, Portuguese, Korean, one by one, 12 flawless. Languages, native level fluency, not a single pause. The room fell into a trance. Students leaned forward. Teachers stopped writing. Even Logan, frozen in the aisle, stared in disbelief. In the fourth row, a professor from the university's linguistics department put a hand over her mouth. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I've never heard this," she whispered to the head judge. "Not at this level. Not from a child." Jamal took a breath, and then in perfect English with every eye on him, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I may be a janitor's son, but knowledge doesn't ask your last name before it opens its doors." Gasps, then a roar of applause. Not polite, not forced, earned. By the next morning, the speech was everywhere. A junior had filmed it from the second row and uploaded the clip to TikTok. Janitor's son silences elite school in 12 languages. It hit 1 million views before lunch. By evening, Jamal's name was trending on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Hashtag Jamal speaks, hashtag 12 tongues one voice, hashtag brilliance needs no bloodline comments pouring from all over the world. I cried. This boy is a genius. Imagine how many Jamals we've overlooked. That smile at the end gave me chills. A local news station ran a segment on him that night. By the next day, CNN called, and on the third day, a letter arrived by courier. The State University of Languages and Global Studies, the same one Logan's dad had boasted about at PDA meetings, offered Jamal a full scholarship and early admission into their honors linguistics program. Meanwhile, the fallout at Westbrook was fast and sharp. A formal complaint was filed by multiple teachers about Logan's years of bullying, many citing that he was protected by privilege. The school launched an investigation. Within a week, Logan was suspended, and Mr. Prescott was asked to step down from the board. And Jamal, he didn't gloat, didn't post anything, didn't even respond to the reporters waiting outside the school gate. He simply walked home, same backpack, same shoes, but a different silence now. Not the silence of being overlooked, the silence of someone who'd been seen. Finally, 1 week later, Westbrook Academy held a special assembly. At first, Jamal thought it was for the science fair, but as he and his father walked into the auditorium, they saw it, on stage beneath a new banner that read, "Where every voice matters," stood the entire staff and student body. The principal cleared her throat. "Mr. Lawrence," she said, "it has come to our attention that behind every extraordinary student is someone who sacrificed everything." She turned and gestured. From behind the curtain, a plaque was unveiled, the Lawrence Legacy Award, in honor of wisdom without wealth. Jamal's father stood frozen, blinking back tears as students applauded. For the first time, he wasn't just a man who mopped floors. He was the man who raised a legend. And Jamal, the quiet boy with 12 voices, smiled, finally unafraid to speak. A few weeks later, after the applause faded and the interview slowed, Jamal found himself standing alone in the quietest corner of the school, the old janitor's closet. But the sign had changed. Now, in bold bronze letters, it read, "Lawrence Hall, for the ones who work in silence." He reached out and ran his fingers over the plaque. The same place his father used to store mops and buckets now stood as a symbol of legacy, grit, and quiet strength. His voice came in a soft narration, calm and clear. "My father cleaned the floors. I walked on them. But one day, I'll fly over them." He smiled, not because he'd proven anything to the world, but because he'd proven something to himself. At the edge of the hallway, a teacher passed by and nodded respectfully. A few students whispered his name, no longer with mockery, but with awe. Jamal turned and walked away, his backpack on, steps light and head held high. The boy they had laughed at had become the story they'd never forget.